Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, and as we continue our series on phobias, today we will talk about the types of phobias. Phobias, as mentioned earlier, are defined as a persistent, irrational fear of objects, situations, and people. Phobias must exist in duration for at least 6 months in order for it to be considered persistent or chronic. In order for a fear to be classified as a phobia, it cannot have its origins in another mental illness matter such as bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or any other mood disorder. Research shows that the number and the diversity of phobias may number into the hundreds or maybe even more. The categories most commonly used, however, to identify phobias are basically 3 groups. First, social phobias. These are often linked to low self-esteem, lack of assertiveness, and a sense of inferiority. Now, the overriding fear is that the individual will be humiliated within the social setting they are either in or potentially may be in at a later date. So the phobia is, if I go into this situation around people, whether people similar to me, people non-similar to me, whether it's race, age, whether it's size, whether it's skin tone, whether it's the way they talk, some people have a social phobia of being around people. There are people who have a social phobia of being around people that are from a different socioeconomic status. People from the South may have a phobia of being around people from the Midwest. People from the West Coast may have a phobia of being around people from the East Coast. People from the North will have a phobia about being around people from the Northeast. And on it can go in terms of how social phobias operate. Secondly, there are specific phobias. These are specific fears of an identifiable thing, an identifiable person, or an identifiable place. When we talk about the fear of spiders, arachnophobia, that is a specific fear of spiders, and yet the individual may not be fearful of other insects. There are agoraphobia. That's the fear of being in an open outside space. There are people who are fearful of dogs. There are other people who are fearful of snakes, but they're not fearful of dogs. There is claustrophobia. There are individuals who are afraid or fearful of closed-in space. So when we talk about specific phobias, it is something that can be identified quite readily, whether it is a thing, whether it is a person, or whether it is a place. Thirdly, there are spatial phobias. These are fears of being confined to a specific place, like a small room, riding in the back seat of a car, being put in a corner, being in a room without windows. Many times, when people have experienced post-traumatic stress syndromes, there are fears of being confined to a certain space. It could be riding in the back seat, but what will happen is it will be a fear that if I'm in the back seat of this car, then an accident is going to happen. It could be in a room without windows. If I'm in this space without windows, it reminds me of when the tornado came through and we were in the storm cellar. So because I'm in a room without windows, it could be equated with a storm. So we're dealing with three specific categories, but nonetheless phobias. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 20, verses 1 through 6, Jeremiah the prophet is mocked. Jeremiah the prophet is beaten by the priest Pashur, and he's put into stocks located in the public square close to the house of the Lord that's located in Benjamin. On the following morning, when Pashur brought Jeremiah forth from the stocks that were designed honestly for public humiliation and for public shame, Jeremiah named Pashur, and he called Pashur Magor Missabib. And the name meant something in the Hebrew language. For thus saith the Lord, behold, I will make thee, meaning Pashur, a terror to thyself, and to all thy friends, and they shall fall by the sword of their enemies, and thine eyes shall behold it. And I will give all Judah into the hand of the king of Babylon, and he shall carry them captive into Babylon, and shall slay them with the sword. Jeremiah tells Pashur that you will become a phobia to yourself, and you'll become a phobia to everyone whose lives you touch. The term, the name Magor Missabib, literally means a terror on every side. It means you are going to make people anxious, and you're going to be anxious yourself. Every time you turn, you're not going to trust people. Everywhere you go, you're going to have a fear of being in an open area, a fear of being in a closed area. You'll have a fear of being around people. Every time you see people, it's going to make you anxious. And every time people see you, they are going to be anxious. Can you imagine such a phobia? Every location, every object, every opportunity becomes a phobia, a fear, a terror, an anxiety-inducing situation. In your lives or in my lives, phobias are over-exaggerated for the most part. Phobias can be controlled for the most part, but they must be addressed, and we must be willing to understand that there are various types of phobias. And in everybody's life, we are exposed at some level to those things that will induce anxieties, but it should never make a person so anxious that all around them and the individual himself or herself cannot function. And yet the text of Jeremiah chapter 20, verses 1 through 6 says, there are individuals in this world who are anxiety-driven, they are fearful of the world around them, and those type people can create in the lives of the others they touch a phobia about just being in the same room, in the same proximity, in the same city, and sometimes even in the same business of others. And Jeremiah says to Pashur, although you are a priest, you are a terror on every side. Define your phobias and then address those phobias. I'll see you back in class again next time. Don't be late and don't skip class.